Welcome back. You're here with Goldberg. Today I want to talk about this idea that we still see billowing and floating in the social midst, where they go, as long as you rely on that power of compound interest, you'll have $1 million in no time. And it's usually a boomer, and they'll usually use some 30-year span of projection, which I'm like, I don't know if we're exactly operating in the same reality here. A million probably isn't enough for a baby boomer to retire, and that's assuming you're just using the principle, not relying on Social Security, which I guess the boomers will enjoy. A million is nowhere near enough. You should be shooting for something like 3 times that number. That would put you in a respectable position now. As far as millennials are concerned, Gen Z, I'm not entirely confident. It really depends, but certainly that is what you should be looking at if you are in such an age category, not $1 million, because $1 million will be chicken feed. $1 million might work if you are going to go live as a single guy in Thailand or Ecuador, or maybe if you're doing van life in a very low-cost red state, but it will not be realistic, I'm just telling you, because you don't just need the money for expenses. Like, you could budget out maybe just $30,000 a year for 30 years, but it is also costs like surprise medical issues. Hopefully you're maintaining your health because it's wealth. This is something I've told you many times before. Diet properly, keep fit, don't expose yourself to things that are just going to make you poisoned and sick later on. But you don't know, and that's why you have to have a little bit more. Otherwise, the first time you have some serious medical issue, you're going to be destroyed. And that's when these guys get into their Smith & Wesson retirement plan, and that's just a tragic thing to think about. But let's just take a look for a second here. All right. So my assumptions are going to be, because this is for the younger generation, my assumptions will be that you're not going to necessarily be able to rely on Social Security. I think that's debatable. It might still be there, but whether it's going to be worth anything is certainly something we have to ask. I'm also going to not necessarily consider you having a 401k. Now, if you have one and there's a match, absolutely make use of it. But a lot of people don't have one, or they have one that doesn't have a match. And now a lot of companies are doing this thing like IBM started. They're going, well, you only get your match if you've been here for a full year. Otherwise, you forfeit it if you leave for another job, even if you're technically vested. So yeah, okay, more cynicism. Let's just take money away from people who have invested and been productive for us. That's just how the game works. But I'm going to use this bank rate calculator. It's actually a follow-up this video to a blog post I made. And I want to give you a sense of how much you should really be shooting for and how absurd it is. Because if $1 million is only maybe a third of what you need, that means $1 million you should be getting that within like 10 years, not 30 years, roughly speaking. And that's why we have to be serious. So we're just going to take a look here, and I'll try my best to not be overly descriptive. I'm using the bank rate calculator for investments, it's relatively simple, but it gives us an idea. And here's our scenario. We want $1 million in 10 years. We have $20,000 starting out, which is a bit much, but not entirely unrealistic. We're going to have a 7% annual return. Now, I know some of you guys will go, what, I got 9, 10, or 11% in my funds. Okay, I mean, good for you. That might shorten it a little bit, but are you going to have that every single year for a decade? It's hard to rely, especially if you're primarily investing in ETFs. It's hard to say that you're going to be able to make, magnanimous returns. Yeah, sure, if you throw your money in the next Shopify or Apple, you'd be fine, but that's something you have to be willing to risk, and it could go the other way potentially. You never know. So we got our 7% return, and we're going to put $500 in per month with these figures. Now, this particular calculator says 2.9% inflation, 25% federal tax, and 6% state tax, but they give you a total before all those things have been applied, right? So you have to keep that in mind. So in 10 years, if we were following that particular model, we would have about $125,000. So we're a little over 10% of our goal, and that's not good enough. So we up it a little bit. We say $1,000 a month. Bear in mind, that is more than most people will save even in a year. I don't know if I'd say most people, but it's pretty close to that. In terms of age ranges, the saving rates are just atrocious in this country. So let's say we do $1,000 a month, same thing, 7% return. In 10 years, we've got a little bit over 20%. We've got 210,000. We're still pretty far short, right? So what is the magic number? And I played around with this a little bit because it was just fascinating to me. As it turns out, what you would need to get $1 million in 10 years with a 7% annual return, give or take a little bit, maybe a little higher, maybe a little bit less, with a 20,000 starting, you would need to be putting $5,700 every single month into investments or savings in order to accumulate $1 million in 10 years. That's pretty ridiculous, folks, right? I mean, it seems like I'm not even able to do that now. I'm getting to that point, but I'm not even there yet. What I would really want you to take away from this is that you cannot simply rely on a 401k. You have to find ways, and my plan is not so much retirement, but rather have enough sources of income to where you have the equivalent of a full-time job, because you don't want to be working forever or you might not be physically capable. But if you can set up through online businesses, through investing in things like, look at the supplemental income funds. I'm doing a Fundrise myself. I think it's been pretty good so far. Look at some of these dividend funds. The point is you have to have enough income coming in to where effectively you're working a full-time job, because otherwise you'll be sitting there like, well, I think that 40,000 will be enough. Maybe if Social Security's around. That's totally ridiculous. And you need more money than they're saying. And realistically, it might not even be enough. So focus on a retirement model that gives you monthly income, equivalent to almost a pension. That's what you want to build up through investing, through building businesses, through your ventures. Not, okay, I'm going to have a decent sum of money and I can pull some out, because more than likely, it just isn't going to cut it at the end of the day.